Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is a 4.4 Phase 2 banner review, but honestly it's just an excuse to talk about how Anaxa fell off and if Cerydra will fall off herself. This will be focusing on their current viability, as well as the future, and their history that led them here, which will influence your decision on who to pull, hopefully. But anyway, let's get on to the video. Let's talk about the first character having a rerun in Phase 2, Anaxa. Anaxa released more than a year ago in 3.2 with Castris. I think the closest resemblance right now to how powerful Anaxa was in release is Gilgamesh, but he's a bit better due to the lack of competition around the time and specific target count. Anaxa was a flexible DPS that could run a combination of Bronya, Ron Mei, Sunday, Sparkle Tribi, and even 4 stars with Ting Yun and Pela, and he could clear MOC just fine. I made a video about how good he was around the time, and a lot of it was because his kit was more self-sufficient, whereas other characters relied more on teammates to cover crucial flaws. With Anaxa, all Anaxa really needs is some damage amplification buffs to make his kit work, instead of crucial breakpoints like energy where Aglaya was deathly reliant on Sunday, or healing like Castris. Anaxa's next update was Cerydra, who was a bit of a weird one. While Anaxa and Cerydra's kits meshed together kinda well, from a numbers perspective, Cerydra wasn't doing that much compared to just bringing another -1 speed action advancer like Sunday. There were rampant comparisons with Robin E1 because of this, though Cerydra had an advantage with skill duplication carrying over to the next wave and having better Eidolon infrastructure for a hypercarry Anaxa. At this point, Anaxa was pretty smooth sailing, and he did survive the power spike brought by Anomaly Arbitration's release on 3.6. His next update would come in the form of Cyrene, which was very much needed since he was starting to lag just a little bit. At this point, his team flexibility is kind of a dead concept. He is a Cerydra and Cyrene diehard DPS. His sub-DPS role with Herta was struggling with or without him, and HP inflated high enough to where most of his other teams with Robin, so to speak, got walled completely. Cyrene was a really huge upgrade for Anaxa, and finally made Cerydra an uncontested upgrade for Anaxa. Simply filling up the air requirement was one thing, but Cyrene essentially gave Anaxa an actual enhanced skill that could be duplicated by Cerydra. With major optimization space due to how much you can front load it, it is an amazing buff. Then all of a sudden, Anaxa fell off hard. While this may be expected due to simply having no upgrades after Cyrene, the amount of things that went against Anaxa had been piling up for quite a while, and the specific point where the cord suddenly snapped was 4.1. 4.1 brought along an HP spike, higher sustained pressure at the start of battles, and partnered with low Eidolon value from Anaxa himself, put Anaxa in a watch list. Again, HP inflation was something everyone had to deal with, so that was fine, but the high sustained pressure on the start of battles started to really bother Anaxa, since he was a character that scaled really well with sustainless, and without a sustain, his performance takes a huge nosedive. He only really has his ult in his toolset for defense, and Cyrene's ramp up without E2 was long enough that it would punish him severely against the new Elation enemies that hit so hard. So it wasn't anywhere near consistent like Break is in sustainless, and even if it could be done, there were already better options. There was also another factor that piled up in version 4.2 that made Anaxa a lot less viable: the introduction of the common high-res mechanic in endgame. Thankfully for night stages it wasn't that bad, since wind mech bosses aren't real, but in king stages like Full Wish and right now with Murata, being wind is a pretty big disadvantage. Anaxa already was falling off the wagon, and now it's become commonplace that he performs 20% worse just because the bosses don't like wind, and outside of Anomaly Arbitration, MOC stages would also have Murata and Pom Pom now, so have fun, I guess. Try playing Anaxa against Murata King Stage, and even with the King Stage buffs, it is simply a struggle because you're still fighting off element, and the HP has increased enough that even on element wouldn't be a magical clear. Overall, Anaxa fell off due to the combination of higher sustained pressure at the start of battles, low Eidolon value to catch up, wind res being a lot more common, and simply the lack of updates. Of course, adding in obvious things that other characters suffer from too, like HP inflation, and you get a character that just wasn't as good as he used to be. But just because he's not top 1 doesn't mean he's not good, right? I know that these types of videos are watched by people that have a different level of acceptable strength, so I'm going to be very direct about this. If you like Anaxa and don't care about endgame, you'll be fine even without his team. You'll be fine with Arlen with that same mindset. What makes you think Anaxa would be bad? But if you have goals, like if you want to consistently do MOC 12 and Star Wars, you definitely have to note that he needs his full team to be decent, and even then he clears a lot slower for the same price of newer units like Himeko Nova. If you care about anomaly arbitration, honestly don't bother investing in Anaxa at all unless you have an E2 Cyrene already. He does have standout performances as an apocalyptic shadow carry because of certain endgame cycles restoring Cyrene's energy, which leads to some pretty funny results, and because of Anaxa's constant implants, he will always break even if resisted. So at the very least, he has one endgame tied down as a silver bullet. Overall, he's just an aged unit that is suffering from coming at a time where anomaly arbitration and Star Wars mode didn't exist and wasn't in the devs' foresight. And now Anaxa's kinda struggling for it due to neglect. I don't think he's worth pulling beyond just liking him at this point. But let's say you still want Anaxa. I get it, he's my favorite character too. Well, none of his Eidolons would be your next choice, that's for sure. Outside of his E6, Anaxa's Eidolons are not very impactful. They are literally worse value than Archer's Eidolons, and Archer was a unit given for free, and backpulling Archer Eidolons now is not recommended either. His signature is decent and can be used on units like Jade or Reen as a supportive DPS, but if you are focusing on carry Anaxa, Herta LC is better stat-wise and more comfortable with Cerydra due to the SP. Who knows when she'll get a rerun though. Unfortunately, you can't really improve your situation with Anaxa by pulling him more right now. His supports Eidolons are better for him, Cyrene E2 being the big one and Cerydra E1 if you're really trying hard to keep him going. That's pretty much it though. Again, Anaxa is my favorite character and I'm very strict on playing him every endgame cycle. He's very flawed and fails to stand out in today's meta. Unfortunately, he's kind of in line for a Nova Flare now that fixes his bad Eidolons and a change in environment where he isn't as punished as he is right now. Next is Cerydra. Cerydra, ever since she came out, was a niche unit that specialized in her ability to double skills. While powerful, there were very few units that could make use of it effectively, and her design was far from perfect. Even her best DPS named Finon finds it awkward that Ceri can't use her ult at all during Caslana form. And like mentioned earlier, Anaxa before Cyrene had choices with double turners that did the same thing. Archer could use Cerydra, but it wasn't a significant upgrade either. She has a similar formula as Zhao Cho in the sense that she is so specialized that her entire existence relies on her DPS as being good. So after almost a year, did that plan out well for the little Imperator? For starters, Finon was always an E2 merchant and his E2 is still an incredible unit to this day. Ironically, due to how unique he is at fighting certain boss mechanics, he can actually clear night stages at E0 sometimes if your build is good enough. Anaxa isn't so lucky though. Even with E2 Cyrene, he's just decent, which is way too expensive. Archer replaced Cerydra with Reen already, and I guess the only one left is Zila, who actually is kinda cool right now. Actually, that's a lie, there's more than one unit. Main DPS Reen is also a very funny unit, and outright needs Cerydra for her main DPS capability to function. Even more than Finon, honestly. But main DPS Reen in general is very gimmicky, due to its one-shot setups wasting more AV than you think it does. Cerydra also works well with Himeko Nova, but we'll get to that. To tally it up, Finon is still good, Anaxa fell off, Archer doesn't care about her anymore, Zila is just a chill dude, and main DPS Reen actually needs her. All things considered, Cerydra ended up in a better spot than Cypher, at least, right? So is Cerydra a good pull? How do I say this in the most vague way possible? There is an upcoming meteor strike that is about to crash into HSR that will change the lives of everyone playing it. Is that a detailed enough a statement? This meteor is so large that despite Cerydra's greatest efforts to hang into her niche, she might be overshadowed in the one thing that she's meant to do, because Star Rail is bad at balancing and numbers are everything in an RPG. My advice in very simple terms is this: if you pull Cerydra now, you might have to consider very soon, maybe even the next patch, that you just pulled a strict downgrade or a side grade compared to a newer unit in Cerydra's team. Let's just say that much, okay? Overall, I do not recommend Cerydra. I love the short stack and I have her E1S1, and I do not recommend her at all despite that. Assuming you like Her Highness though, how do you pull? Cerydra's investments are pretty weird. Her E1 is kinda but at the very least it does something for her support power. Her other Eidolons are relatively low impact for support though. But E6 unlocks a completely different playstyle that makes use of her E2 to E5 to make Cerydra an actual main DPS. It's really weird, it's highly unrealistic, and definitely not worth the money, but it's really cool since no other unit plays like this. Her signature is meh, especially because she can just use DDD. That's pretty much it though. Even changing the DPS, the priority for Cerydra doesn't really change. Generally, Cerydra's verticals will be the last in the totem pole, and she shares the same syndrome as fellow shorty Xiao, where only her E1 and E6 really exist. And now, the Imperator will close with this. My dear Dukes, my time may be short, but the Imperator will always win. Eventually, anyway. Next is Aventurine, the preservation version. Wow, they really pulled the nastiest setup on this guy. If you needed a sustain, DHPT was phase 1, and if you're a fan of Aventurine, he was given for free at some point, so why would you not pick him? And why won't you spend your pulls on his SP version instead, which is guaranteed to be at least be more viable than his preservation version? It's hilarious. It's almost like they ran out of ideas on who to rerun. Many endgame accounts don't even need a third sustain anymore due to being baseline sustainless like Break, and Aventurine was designed with 2.x philosophies, which means his amp really is not anything to gush over like something like a Hyacine, for example. Just use Gallagher or Gepard and you'd probably get the same result as Aventurine. Do I want to dignify this rerun with any more jokes? Not really. This is just kicking someone while they're down at this point, so let's leave them alone. Anyway, that's all for the phase 2 and 4.4, aka the Anaxa and Cerydra yapping that I wanted to post. I hope you guys like this video, like, sub, do the algorithm stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.